Burning Earth in an aggro deck is a pretty good place to be in the metagame, and here we're seeing, you know, like more Jund decks rose to the top near the end of the tournament, but there were so many Jund decks by the end that all the red-green decks just skyrocketed to the tippity top because of their favorable matchup against Jund.
Yeah, so while they have a favorable matchup against Jund, Bryce Felt's playing the Rock deck, which to me is kind of, you know, a two-color take on Jund. It plays a lot of, you know, those same control elements that Jund plays, but rather than stretching the mana base for cards like Olivia Voldaren or Dreadbore or Rakdos' Return, it's just straight black-green. It actually has a fair number of basics in the deck. It plays 13 swamps, so it's a little more resilient to Burning Earth, and it gains access to cards like Mutilate.
Yeah, I think that this black-green deck it's like a Jund deck that is just so much better in every way against these Dragon Master red-green decks. First of all, taking their best card, Burning Earth, and completely just neutering it, where it's not even a good card against them anymore because of the sheer volume of basics they have. And then on top of that, instead of relying on a 3/3 creature like Olivia, which is a little slow to get going and can die to Mizium Mortars, instead he's got cards like Desecration Demon, you know, and then instead of relying on Bonfire, which Bonfire can be good, but sometimes it can be a little bit tricky to actually kill big creatures with it against, like if you don't Miracle it, and Mutilate is just, it's always going to be great against a deck like a deck like this.
Yeah, so we have right now both players on 6 cards. Bryce, as the number 5 seed right now, will be on the play this game.
And both players are at 6 cards, both going to a mulligan already. We'll see if they stay there now.
So while the red-green deck, we'd said, you know, we noticed actually in our top 16, you know, we had, what was it, almost 9 Jund decks, but then red-green really just flooded into the top 8. It has a great Jund matchup. Does it still have a great matchup here against the Rock deck?
I think a lot less so. As I said, I think the Burning Earth is like a fundamental reason why the deck is favored, and it certainly doesn't blow Jund out. It's got just a small edge, but losing its best weapon combined with a slight upgrade in power level of cards like Mutilate and Desecration Demon for this particular matchup, I think that Tobey is slightly behind in this matchup.
Yeah, so we see right now a couple of creatures just staring at each other from across the board. We had a Scavenging Ooze and an Arbor Elf as the first plays from the players respectively, but Tobey gets the first hit in. He has a Flinthoof Boar on turn 2.
Yeah, at this point, Bryce is going to be just trying to keep these creatures under control before his life total dips too low, because if the game goes a little bit later, cards like Thragtusk and Desecration Demon are going to give him a pretty big advantage.
Yeah, so it looks like Bryce is actually going to go ahead and race back. He activated Mutavault and attacked with it and Scavenging Ooze this turn, putting Tobey down to 16, you know, kind of accepting this challenge to race damage.
Yeah, this is, I mean, he's not really set up for this kind of a race, but depending on the texture of his hand, he might just not have any other plays to make. Still, he's choosing to swing with the Scavenging Ooze for 2 rather than threaten to block the Arbor Elf for 1.
All right, so interestingly enough, Tobey now is in the situation where he's declining the race. He swings for 1 with the Arbor Elf, but actually holds back Flinthoof Boar as a blocker as he makes a second Arbor Elf on the board.
Interesting. Definitely a very change in rhythm here. It probably suggests that that Tobey is going to play a Thundermaw Hellkite next turn.
All right, so he's just going to, kind of stall out the ground game and hopefully just fly over for those points.
Yeah, and I mean, it also depends largely on what kind of a turn we see out of Bryce. But either way, I actually a little bit surprised, just because a deck like Tobey's would love to trade. You know, he's only taking 2 damage in order to trade 3. But I guess if he's concerned about the Mutavault beatdown also, that's potentially as much as 4 damage.
Well, neither player missing a drop here. We see the 4th land from Bryce Felt. He actually taps that to make Disciple of Bolas. That's going to sacrifice the Scavenging Ooze for 2 cards and 2 life.
Yeah, he's definitely looking for something. A little bit of an indication that he's slightly flooded. Otherwise, he sure would love to play some of his removal spells or fatties if he's got any.
Yeah, so let's see if there's that Thundermaw. It looks like there is one in Tobey's hand, and we see very quickly a 4th land attacked with the Arbor Elf, and it is Thundermaw Hellkite. Now with the Scavenging Ooze out of the way, Tobey's going to go ahead and go on the offensive with the entire team. So it's Arbor Elf, Flinthoof Boar, and Thundermaw Hellkite, threatening a swing of 9 damage.
Yeah, now the Flinthoof Boar and the Thundermaw make it through. The Disciple trades with the Arbor Elf, leaving Bryce down to 10.
All right, so right now, Bryce has an Overgrown Tomb and a Swamp. That third land is a Golgari Guildgate, so we're still a long ways off from mutilating a Thundermaw Hellkite.
Yeah, and this Woodland Cemetery doesn't bring us any closer. However, he does play another Scavenging Ooze, and if he has a Putrefy or a Doomblade, he's not in that bad a shape. His life total is still a little lower than he would like, but it's going to make all the difference if that Thundermaw Hellkite lives or dies.
All right, so after that, he leaves up 2 green mana and a Mutavault for that Scavenging Ooze, and he goes ahead and passes back to Tobey to replace his 5th land, and then a Scavenging Ooze of his own. If you're Bryce here, you may want to clear out some of the creatures before that ooze is on the table.
I mean, unless you have like a Doomblade or a Putrefy.
All right.
Yeah, like it's certainly possible that you clear one out in response if you have a Doomblade.
All right, now this is very interesting. He blocks with Scavenging Ooze, and he tries to eat creatures too. He blocks the Flint of Forth Scavenging Ooze and tries to eat creatures, but it looks like because he didn't eat creatures immediately, Tobey's going to be able to target those creatures instead, getting them with his own Scavenging Ooze.
Yeah, that's going to be a real tough one. If you're not going to Doomblade, you have to eat in response. But
right. Otherwise, you get into this war here where basically whichever player tries to eat a card first loses.
Or just whoever has the least mana available.
Right. So we do see Tobey's Ooze grows up to a 4/4. He gains 2 life.
Bryce packs it in with no answer to the Thundermaw. It's already over.
All right. So while the players shuffle up for Game 2, we're going to go ahead and bring you back into the booth here. For those of you who are just joining us this morning and are watching the live broadcast, remember that we do rebroadcast this. We do trivia at this point, the prize being 6 months of Star City Games Premium.
Yes.
All right.
What's the trivia question?
Okay, so our trivia question right now, this is, we're going to go ahead and kind of throw on, if you've been following the entire Open, that should be pretty easy. We are looking at, so we already know that one of probably the biggest deck in this top 8 would be the red-green aggro deck piloted by Tobey, right?
Absolutely.
We're looking for what card from M14 has shown up, what 4 mana card from M14 has shown up in all these players' sideboards. It is, as a hint of it, it was not in Kibler's original deck list, but it was suggested as a replacement by him for.
So you're talking about not in addition to Burning Earth.
In addition to Burning Earth, sorry,
right.
Yes. In addition to Burning Earth, we were looking for a 4 mana card from M14. So it took the spot of Gruul Warchant in most of these players' sideboards.
A sideboarded 4 casting cost card from M14 besides Gruul Warchant. Or not Gruul Warchant, besides Burning Earth. So if you have the answer, tweet at us at SCG Live with hashtag SCG Premium. Let us know, and it's a Planeswalker. Just let us know immediately, and we will pick one person at random before the end of the round.
All right. So let's go ahead and go back to our match, though. Post-board, usually these matchups, when you have a board control deck, I think, like Bryce Felt's, usually the matchup gets better for him post-board. Especially when you said, we've noticed that, Tobey's main plan against these Jund-style decks is to play Burning Earth. You already mentioned that that's not exactly as strong against Bryce's deck where half the lands are basics.
Right. That said, Felt does have access to a variety of cheap removal, like you said, which includes Abrupt Decay, Devour Flesh, possibly Ratchet Bomb if he's into it, but it's probably too clunky. Even Golgari Charm is a possibility. I don't know if you want it, but it's potentially a way to clean up some creatures, and also potentially deal with a Burning Earth if he thinks that it's even worth it at half strength.
Yeah, I know that in this matchup we saw almost all our Jund players board in that Golgari Charm. Out of the rock, though, you're right. It doesn't necessarily have to answer the Burning Earth.
And then, of course, Mutilate. Mutilate's going to be just a fantastic card here.
Yeah, that's the 4th Mutilate. He has 3 in the main and then the 4th one in the board. So really he just becomes more about the all-removal spell plan.
Yeah, I mean, it's these red-green decks, it's super important to be able to deal with the big ones, like the Hell Riders and the Thundermaw Hellkites. A deck like Bryce's can potentially go over the top of the Strangleroot Geist, the Flinthoof Boars, the Elves, things like that, and attack down Maraude. So as long as he can keep things like Hell Rider, Thundermaw, and possibly even Scavenging Ooze off the table, then he can try to go a little bit bigger.
Yeah, as we did see there in that last game, it was really that unanswered Thundermaw that got him. It was 10 damage on attacks.
Yeah, and on the other side, not a whole lot of great options for Tobey. he does have access to one Garruk the Relentless, which seems like a reasonable threat. But beyond that, I mean, maybe he wants Chandra Pyromancer as Zealous Conscript. It's not terrible. It's possible he even wants Burning Earth at half strength, but it hardly, it affects 9 of his own land and only 12 of Bryce's.
So yeah,
we'll see.
As a reciprocal effect, not exactly what he's, certainly not as strong as it could be. I know we have seen that Chandra be sided in against Jund decks, right? It typically is against those Thragtusk Jund decks. So I think it would stand, that it's something he may board in here.
Absolutely. Just to make a Desecration Demon or a Thragtusk not able to block, it can go a long way.
Yeah. So in our other semifinal, right now we're setting up for what may be a red-green aggro mirror in the finals. Rouger Abear takes game 1 from David Hunting. Remember, that is a red-green aggro versus Jund matchup.
Yeah, and that's particularly tough because game 1 is supposed to be the one that Jund tries to win. It tries to make sure that it gets, because it gets much worse after board.
Yeah, so I actually have a pretty good story for Rouger here. If you remember, round 1 of the entire Open, we had on camera William Jensen actually playing against Rouger Abear. William Jensen won that game. So Rouger started off the tournament 0-1, losing his first turn on camera, and actually has not lost a match since that round. And is now 1 game away from being in the finals of the SCG Open.
Yeah, that just goes to show you can't give up. You got to just, as long as you're in contention, you're in contention. But on this side of the bracket, we're going to go to a quick game 2. And overall, we're probably going to have a pretty quick top 4 here anyway. A lot of fast, aggressive decks.
Yeah, we're out of blue decks, so we're not going to have any of those Revelation Mirror style matchups, which can just go on and on.
Yeah, absolutely. And even these decks, I mean, they may not be the turn 4, like all-in Burning Tree Emissary type of decks, but as you can see, they still get the game over with in a hurry sometimes.
So that was an interesting point which I kind of want to touch on here. You mentioned these all-in Burning Tree Emissary decks. Now, typically when I've thought of red-green aggro in Standard, I've been thinking of these Burning Tree Emissary, Stromkirk Noble, Rakdos Cackler, Volcanic Strength style decks. They've really fallen out of favor. People are playing these red-green Dragon Master style aggro decks instead. Is this, it seems like it's a reaction to the metagame in a certain way?
Oh yeah, I mean, it very much is a reaction. It's one of those things where if other people are playing mid-range, you don't want to be the slightly smaller deck. You want to be the slightly big. You want to be slightly bigger than what everybody else is doing, or much faster. And the format's too fast right now to be able to consistently go much faster than it.
Right. So the red-green aggro decks, the red-green, I guess I'll call them red-green emissary decks.
Sure.
Those do try to do that thing where they sneak under the aggro decks, but it's just not, they don't do it consistently enough.
Yeah, so sometimes they just try to be much faster, and if everybody else is playing Pillar of Flames and Mizzium Mortars and lots of 1 and 2 cast and cost creatures, it's a lot less effective of a plan. Yeah. So it looks like Bryce is going to 6 again. He's having a good laugh. Some days you're mono mulligan control.
So
he picks his 6 cards up.
Yep. He does have a fair number of ways to recoup the card advantage. We did see that Disciple of Bolas, Lifebane Zombie in his deck as a 4 of actually in the main. Probably another way for him to get back on a couple cards.
Yeah, and this matchup isn't a matchup where card advantage is the end-all be-all anyway. Like, Sign in Blood, there you go, back to card parity. No, this is one of those matchups where sometimes somebody will just have a couple extra land, or you'll have some elves and they're not even doing anything, or you have some removal just sitting in your hand. But really what it comes down to are the heavy hitters like Thundermaw Hellkite and Thragtusk and Desecration Demon and Damirata, the high impact cards.
Yeah, so we see a swing for 2 from Strangleroot Geist from Tobey. That's the first creature on the board. But I do like what you're saying there. I mean, last game it looks like we saw the game end with both players still having at least 3 cards in their hand.
Right.
So Bryce will respond with that Lifebane Zombie. He actually does not hit a green creature. We see 3 mountains, a Chandra Pyromaster, a Zealous Conscripts, and a Domri Rod.
Interesting. Do you suppose he boarded out even more green cards, like Gore-Clan Rampager, in order to just get as many, in order to brick Lifebane Zombie as much as possible?
Well, when I see a card like Chandra Pyromaster and Zealous Conscripts, one of the things I was noticing, especially about Tobey's sideboard, is that if he boards in all these cards, that's a lot of high-end cards, so I have to think that some number of 4s and 5s are leaving the deck. I don't know if he can just how many
imagine
large
it's-
cards can he board in?
Yeah, I gotta imagine it's the Gore Clan Rampagers thing, because I think the Hell Riders and Thunderbolt Hellkites are both going to be just fantastic for him, and the Gore Clan Rampager gives him a little bit of, first it's vulnerable to instant speed removal, but second it makes him more vulnerable to Lifebane Zombie, which Kibler had listed as one of the biggest flaws in the deck beforehand.
Yeah, so Tobey now plays that Doming Rod and makes kind of one of my favorite plays that this deck has. He uses the Doming Rod to fight the Lifebane Zombie with Strangleroot Geist, actually growing the Geist to a 3/2 and then swinging it in again, dropping Bryce down to 13.
Yep, definitely a good play, and we're looking at a real hard couple of turns for Bryce here. I mean, he's down 1-0, he's facing down a 3/2 creature and a Domerade, and the next two turns are going to bring a Chandra Pyromancer and a Zealous Conscript. Blocking is completely off the table.
Yeah, so there's no blocking. He actually has to be very wary of casting a card like Desecration Demon just because of that Zealous Conscripts.
Right, I mean, he's going to need a few removal spells, but it's also going to be tough because his deck is not very well set up to fight Planeswalkers that cost 4 or more.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's interesting, you're right. So he has to answer these Planeswalkers, which creatures are the answer. But if he plays too many creatures, then Zealous Conscripts is going to kill him. So he's kind of in this really...
Well, if he plays any creatures, Zealous Conscript
yeah.
will kill him. What he needs to do is have enough land so that he can play removal and a creature in the same turn.
Right.
Either way, it's going to be a real tough sequence of cards for him to beat.
So Tobey, with that 3/2 Geist, now knocks Bryce down to 8 life. He's going to play Chandra Pyromaster and probably just ping for 1 more damage.
Yeah, Bryce needs his 1 Vraska, like, real quick.
Now, do you even board in Vraska typically against low-end aggro decks? I guess this isn't low, this is a mid-range
Yeah,
aggro
and
deck.
you know he has access to a lot of Planeswalkers and Thunderbolt Hellkites, so it's not the greatest, but it's not, I like it better than some of his other expensive cards. You know, like, he certainly doesn't need stuff like Underworld Connections here.
Yeah, so if you read Chandra there, Bryce was checking whether or not he needed to have a creature in play for that +1 ability, and it says up to 1 target creature. It does have 1 target player, so Tobey just uses that to deal 1 to Bryce, putting him down to 7. And so now if you count the possibility of Chandra dealing 1 damage next turn, between that Chandra, the Strangleroot Geist, and the Zealous Conscripts in Tobey's hand, that's already 7 damage right here.
Yeah, now Vraska can leave Bryce at 1, but he doesn't have that either.
No, but it looks like he plays a Mutavault as his 5th land and passes back, so it looks like some combination of Mutavault and removal spells is going to be his plan to survive this turn.
Yeah. Now, the problem with the Mutavault plan is, of course, Zealous Conscript can remove it as a blocker.
Yeah, and Tobey has drawn a Flint of Boar for the turn also.
Looks like he has a Thundermaw Hellkite, too.
Oh, wow. Okay, so, as called, we see Thundermaw Hellkite. And Tobey's going to go ahead and try for that lethal swing here. Probably force Bryce's hand on the Mutavault.
Yeah, so Bryce, ideally, for Bryce's camp anyway, is to block the Strangler Geist with the Mutavault and cast Doomblade or Putrefy on Thundermaw Hellkite. A little surprised that we didn't see the Zealous Conscript just to make sure that you got that the extra 3 damage through from the Strangler Geist. But either way, Tobey in a commanding position with a Chandra at 6 and Bryce down to 6.
Yeah, well, Bryce making all the right moves, though. As you said, though, he did have that Putrefy plus the block, so he was able to only take 1 damage there. He is down to 6, but we do know Tobey still has a Flint of 4 and a Zealous Conscript, so a lot of haste damage.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the tough things, too, is that Bryce knows he has the Conscript, so he's forced to try to play around that every turn. But he doesn't know about the Flinthoof Boar, so he's going to end up he's going to get hit, threatened by a haste creature next turn and still have to beat the Conscript again.
Yeah. One thing he can kind of be a little more relaxed about is that the Chandra in this matchup doesn't actually, I think I mentioned this before, it doesn't really have an ultimate in the Red-Green Dragon Master deck. You never actually ultimate the card, you just use the first 2 abilities, the +1 and the 0.
Right. Yeah, it's very much just about the other 2 abilities. And often, just removing blockers and pinging, is definitely plan A.
All right, so we see another Mutavault to replace the one that blocked there. Bryce, clearly in a tough spot. He's signing Bloods, targeting
He's
himself.
not a punk.
Yeah, all right.
No fear. Let's do this.
Gonna go to 4. Passes back. So now we have, with that ping from Chandra, both attackers in Tobey's hand do represent lethal. And we see a Hell Rider now drawn from Tobey.
There are very few... Wow. Every card Tobey draws is just game over. He just has to play 1 each turn and decide which one it is.
Right, he has 3 3/3 hastes in his hand. All of them, one of them is just a regular 3/3 haste. Then he has one that deals damage on attacks. Then he has another one that steals something. So Tobey grabbing Mutavault for a second.
And he's making a break for it. Apparently,
The card is worth a fair amount.
well, it ends now. This is it. I guess you got to pick your spot to make your move.
I think he has a judge question on it.
You sure? You sure he's not
that's
just making
my
a
guess.
break
No,
for it?
well, those are the
semifinals?
options. You know, I think it's because he's on camera here. I would suspect that he's going to go ahead and going to not take the card. It would be a very bold move, to say the least.
Tobey decides which one to lead with. He decides the conscript.
I think he was asking about the interaction between Zealous Conscripts and Mutavault, whether or not, you know, if Bryce activates in response, whether that stops it, because...
Well, if he targets the Mutavault, if Bryce had made it a creature, and with itself, it would be tapped, and then when Tobey untaps it, it would have Summoning Sickness, and could not tap for mana. Which, I mean...
So wait, say that one more time?
Oh no, it wouldn't have Summoning Sickness. The Zealous Conscript is giving a haste anyway.
Yeah. But
Either
way, it's lethal.
Yeah, Tobey advances to the finals, winning 2-0 against Bryce Felt. On the other side of the bracket, I think we're going to jump over there. We don't have too much of that one left.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, we're looking at
David Hunting and Ruger Aber. They're in game 2 right now.